everyone. Welcome to the latest in the GeoTalks Express series. We're very happy today to be introducing you to Global Mapper version 24. Wow, we're up to 24. That's almost like a quarter of a century, I guess. But today we're going to be introducing you to the new functionality in the standard version. This is a two-part presentation. You may know we're going to be joining you, or you're going to be joining us, hopefully, on Thursday of this week, 48 hours from now, as we go through the Global Mapper Pro functionality. For these two sessions, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Jeff Hatzel. Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Good morning, David. Good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm great. Jeff, I'll introduce as the product manager for Global Mapper. So any questions you have, this is your opportunity to ask the guru, ask the powers that be, what's going on with Global Mapper. So Jeff, delighted to have you with us. Jeff will be sharing his expertise, going through some of our the workflows, introducing those new and important tools. Before we get started, the inevitable housekeeping issues that we need to cover before we jump in here. This is a webinar. Over the last few years, I'm sure you've been to many. You are in listen-only mode. Hopefully you're hearing myself, hearing Jeff. Unfortunately, we can't hear you. However, you have the opportunity to interact with us. There is a questions panel over there on the right side of your screen. Hopefully you found that already. Any questions you have, please ask them in that panel. We will try to answer some of those questions in real time as we're introducing the functionality. We can answer the questions about that functionality. If we don't have a chance to do that, we will follow up with you directly and answer any questions that you ask. Look out for an email. We know who you are. You've registered with your email, so we can respond to your email with whatever questions that are asked. So please do ask questions. This is your opportunity to find out what's going on with Global Mapper, and we want to hear from you. This session is being recorded. I always like to verify it is. Thumbs up, it is being recorded. This recording will be processed in a couple of days. And again, you'll get notification of that. So if you want to maybe go back and revisit some of the things that we talk about, or indeed share this with your colleagues, you can send that link to them and they can find out what they missed during this session. So there's a number of additional sessions coming up. I did mention that within a couple of days, we're going to be revisiting, regrouping, and introducing the Global Mapper Pro functionality. That takes place on October 6th, same time. At the end of today's presentation, I'll share a link with you. If you have not yet registered for that, we'll share that link so that you can jump on and see what's new in Global Mapper Pro. Even if you're not using Global Mapper Pro currently, it might be useful just to see what's been added to that platform. Into November, we're going to be shifting our focus to our other flagship application, Geographic Calculator. We are in the process of releasing, or will be in the process of releasing a new version of that application. If you've not used that before, this might be a good opportunity for you to find out what that's all about. So November 6th, again, if you're on our email list, you will get notification of that one. I believe registration is already open for that one as well. December, we're going to take a slightly different focus. We're going to leave it up to you as users to decide what we cover. We're going to do a combination of things. We're going to bring in some of the questions that we are most often asked from users. That would be from our tech support crew. What do folks want to know about Global Mapper? We're also going to interact with you directly. Look out for some communication on this. What questions would you like us to address in that session? So on our December 8th session, we'll have kind of a user-directed content, non-scripted at this stage. We're kind of a little nervous as to how this will go, but again, registration is open for that. If you want some more information
at the end of the year, there, David, to kind of relax before the holidays and just see what our users are curious about and how we can fill them in.
Yeah, and I think Jeff has an ulterior motive here. It is very beneficial for us to know what users are, or what issues they have.
Well, yeah.
It certainly helps us in terms of development, but also gives you opportunity to learn a little bit more about the software. So mutually beneficial session on December 8th. In the next few weeks, we will be looking at the schedule for the 2023 sessions. Look out for an announcement about that as well. Now, one slide I don't have in here, which I do want to mention, in December, January 25th is our annual user conference. That is the GeoTalks conference. It's a day-long event. We've already got our speakers lined up. It looks like a very exciting day. Again, look out for information on that. Set aside that day in your calendar now. That is our day-long user conference, January 28th. We'll be releasing more information about that in the coming weeks and months. But mark your calendar for now. So that is what's coming up. We've also got some training coming up. There's one more session this year. Now, this is going to give you a final opportunity in the 2022 calendar year to go to our training sessions. It's also going to be the first opportunity for you to be trained on the latest version. So if you need some help with the latest functionality, this is going to be your opportunity. Just over a month from now, we have our Global Mapper class. That's a week-long class, 3 hours a day. It's an online class. So if you can set aside that time, the folks who attend our classes get a lot of benefit from being able to use the software most effectively. The following week, we'll do a LiDAR specific class. This again is carried over from what we've done in the past, where we spend, again, that's a 3-day session exploring Global Mapper Pro's LiDAR processing functionality. There is still space available in these classes. They are filling up. So if you're interested in training, those are the opportunities you have before the end of the year. Again, we will be looking at the schedule for 2023 and make those announcements within the next few weeks. I also want to mention that custom training is available. I just finished a custom class just last week with an organization, and again, we can focus training to your specific needs if that's more appropriate for you or for your company. So training on demand, let us know if you're interested in that. You can get more information on all of our training opportunities at the website you see on there. You can go to bluemarblegeo.com and look for the training link. It's under the support section if you're navigating through the website. I also want to mention the scholarship. If you do subscribe to our emails, you probably saw the announcement earlier this week. We have opened up this scholarship for the 2022-23 academic year. We're giving away $1,000 and also a copy of Global Mapper Pro to any undergraduate or graduate student who, or a undergraduate student who submits a written thesis, project report, or poster, as you see here. We will select the winner. We have a committee of subject matter experts that will scrutinize the entries, and we select our winner. The deadline for that, let me just bring it up, at the end of the year, December 31st. So if you are a student, or maybe you're a teacher, or you're aware of some students who are working perhaps with Global Mapper or in the GIS program, let them know about this. It's a very generous offer, and we'll usually invite the winner of this to attend our conference. We introduce them during our conference. If you want to, again, a little exposure as you go out into the workplace, you'll get that as well as a peripheral benefit. Again, information on this as well as our other academic programs, our academic licensing, etc. You'll see the website at the bottom of that screen. Back to today, let's take a look at what we're going to be doing. Like as we typically do with these introductory sessions, we're going to look back a little bit. And I know there are folks of you who are likely still using older versions. We want to remind you what we've done in the last year. We're going to look at kind of a quick list of functions that have been introduced in version 23 and 23.1. Then we'll get into this latest release. The first workflow that we're going to go through, actually, we're going to be a couple of workflows, introduce the idea of 3D point profiling, the idea of rendering points within the profile view. Jeff is going to take us through an exercise, a quick workflow where he's going to take a multi-band image and combine those bands into a single image. Again, this is a new image processing function. You'll see, by the way, in the release, there are a lot of new functions related to image processing and raster processing. We've been doing a lot of work in that side. Related to that, we'll take a look at a couple of new raster contrast options. Improving the quality of your imagery, I guess, is how you could define these. The layout editor. Every release, there's small tweaks to the layout editor, this being the process or the tool that allows you to design a map for printing, perhaps. And we've made some improvements in there as well, again, based on a lot of customer requests that have come in. The rendering of 3D vector features has been improved as well. We'll take a look at that. The idea of applying transparency. You can actually see that over on the left side of my screen, or on the right side of my screen already. Also rendering holes in features. So we'll take a look at an example of how that can be used. Land cover data. There's a really nice new land cover data has been introduced into our online services. Jeff's going to take a look at that. We'll be describing a little bit about the data itself and how it can be used. And finally, this is an interesting one as well. We've always had the ability to link a document, a file, to a feature in Global Mapper. You click on that file, it opens up in the appropriate application. We're going to take a look at a PDF, but specifically what we've improved here is the idea of linking to a specific page in that PDF. So we'll take a look at an example of that towards the end of our session. There's a lot more. Time permitting, we'll also introduce the full list of new functionality, you can browse through that and find out what other improvements have been made. So that's what we're hoping to cover here in the next hour. I think we're down to about 50 minutes now as we guide you through the new functionality. Jeff, maybe you could help us go through a little bit of what we've done. I guess what we did in the last year with the release of version 23 and then version 23.1.
Sure, absolutely. So those of you who have been with Global Mapper for a long time know that we had the release of Global Mapper Pro, and while on the surface it feels like just a name change sometimes between the LiDAR module, which those of you who are familiar with. I think it really allowed us functionally to better represent all that the more advanced tools in Global Mapper allow us to think that we're able to accomplish. Very often people would say, oh, well, why is this a LiDAR module tool? When in fact, it's really just more advanced functionality. And I really think that helped us, better structure and organize the applications tool sets and some of the more advanced things in there. Undo and redo, David, I'm sure you can attest to, we have had requests for quite a long time where people want the ability to undo and redo any sort of analysis or functions that they're working on. Maybe you make a quick little mistake, place a wrong point. That was added with version 23 as well. So really, cleaning up some workflow stuff there.
Yeah, I think if I had $1 for every time that was asked in training classes, I would be able to retire right now. Yeah, long overdue, I think many people would assume, but very powerful. I think very, very useful for working with a digitizer. You do any structural modifications of vector features. It's easy now to go back to the original. So yeah, there's a really powerful undo manager. We're not always going to focus on that. If you want to see more details on this, and indeed any of the version 23 tools, the last year's version of this presentation is on our website. Our YouTube channel, you can see it right there.
Yeah. 3D labeling. I mean, the right side of the screenshot here, 3D labels were something that we had requests for a long time. We put a lot of effort and pride into our 3D viewer and being able to dynamically display labels for features while we're navigating and working in the 3D viewer was a great add. I still sometimes will see it while I'm working, and it'll kind of catch me by surprise for just how great it looks while we're working with potentially labeled data in the 3D view. Python scripting, I mean, that's another great addition to Global Mapper. I'm just thinking of this list, David. We really had some great highlights back on version 23. Anyway, Python scripting, Python is very common in the broader geospatial world. Global Mapper has always had its own scripting language, and then bringing in the power of Python so that users can work natively in Global Mapper in Python, or maybe call the Global Mapper Python libraries in their own environments or applications, just really expands automation, ease of use, and all the functionality that Python brings to the table there.
Yeah, and one of the things that was not in here, but also a byproduct of that, is the new script editor, which is really powerful as well. For
absolutely, yeah, that's just so great to have for any of you who are familiar with writing any scripts. Being able to do so now, writing Global Mapper with syntax highlighting, just a really handy way to work on your scripts and your automation.
Yeah, and a little tease for Thursday session. We've done some more work with scripting.
That's right.
Really powerful stuff. So if you're interested in scripting at all, you definitely should be coming along on Thursday to see the session.
Break line extraction, another automated feature that we added to the application. Again, driven by user requests, where users are saying, I need to automatically find my break lines, and how are we going to go about doing that based on our terrain data. So another new tool that was added back as part of the 23 release. And then probably one of the most, I find anyway, exciting additions was point cloud segmentation. And segmentation methods allow us to, one of the big ways we use them is part of automated classification of LiDAR point clouds, which really help us expand into looking at, as point clouds are now being acquired so many different ways, not just from a fixed wing aircraft, but maybe a drone or, photogrammetric point clouds from the pixels to points tool, or a terrestrial LiDAR, all these different types of point clouds. Segmentation really allows us to classify and analyze them in much more accurately and in much more advanced ways. And that even has its own dedicated tool where you can build your own, segmentation process. We further improved a tool that had been around for a while to allow us to create vector features from raster data. Very common if we're looking at maybe older, scan maps or features of that nature where you want to identify things by color and pull them out of our data sets. Another good tool that was added to version 23 as well.
And I have to say, one of my favorite tools in Global Mapper, to be honest, vectorization, really, really powerful. It allows you to use your raster data as a resource from which to pull vectors. So really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then, as Global Mapper Mobile, our mobile product has been growing. We're working on streamlining the, connection between desktop and mobile devices. And so we had some initial updates with version 23 in terms of how do we get our data to and from our mobile devices, and we'll talk a little bit more on Thursday about some even more new updates to that for data merging and versioning of data that's gathered in the field.
Yeah, so that's just a look over the shoulder at what we did in the last year, what was introduced in the last year. If you're using an older version of Global Mapper, obviously everything you see here on this list is going to be in version 24 as well. So if you're working still on version 2021, you'll get all this. You'll get the new stuff as well. Now, speaking of older versions, we like to do this during our presentations. A little bit of interactivity here. I'm going to ask you a question. What we'd like to know from you as our attendees is which version of Global Mapper you are currently using. Now, I know some of you will likely already have updated to version 24. Great. Some of you are probably still using an older version. Please take a few seconds here to answer the question that you see on screen. You can click right within the box and let us know who you are. We'll just give you a few seconds to complete that question, to answer that question. And again, when we're done here, we'll share the results with you. Just a second, and we'll allow you to make your selection. You can change your selection, by the way, if you change your mind, and then we'll get back to our presentation. Let me just make sure my screen sharing is still on. And 3, 2, 1. Let's close that now. Interesting results. Let me go ahead and share that poll with you. You should be able to see the results. A lot of you have jumped on board with version 24. Thank you for that. Early adopter. Some of you still sitting on version 23. Half of you. Hopefully what we cover today will be enough incentive for you to jump on board. Some of you are using older versions, 22 and older, and we've got a few here who are not using Global Mapper. With a special thank you for you folks who are not currently users showing up. You might want to join the crowd here and jump on board with Global Mapper to see what it has. We'll just be talking about the new stuff today, but yeah, it's worthwhile taking a look at all the other stuff that's in there as well. So thank you for your input. Thank you for sharing your position, and we'll go ahead and hide that right now. And let's get back to our agenda. So the first bullet on the list is 3D point profiling. I'm going to take a look at 2 different scenarios that will introduce that. The profiling tool is, for those of you, again, who are maybe relatively new to Global Mapper, a tool that allows you to create a cross-sectional view of your data. Now, it works with terrain data, that cutaway view. I'm sure you've seen it before. It also works with LiDAR data. We're actually going to take a look at scenarios that use both of those types of data in this situation. Now, the profiling of vector data has always been supported for lines and for polygons. When I say always, it hasn't. In previous versions, that was introduced, where a line or a polygon intersect your profile line, it will indicate where that is in your profile view. But points were always problematic because points in and of themselves do not have any dimension. So how do you render that in a cutaway view? Well, we found a solution. I'm going to show you that right now. I'm going to load up a workspace that is likely going to look fairly familiar to those of you who have been with us in previous sessions. We use this workspace as a quick illustration of a very powerful component of Global Mapper Pro, which is our pixels to points tool. Now, we're not going to go through that workflow today. If you want to see that in action, if you want to see how we generate 3D data from images, absolutely, you can follow that presentation in some of our other recorded videos. What we have here are point features representing drone images. We also have little icons indicating the direction of travel. Again, we can process these into a 3D point cloud. What we want to do today is simply illustrate how we can render these point features in part of a profile as a cross-sectional view, maybe showing variations in the elevation of my drone as each of these individual images were captured. Before I show you the workflow itself, there is a specific setting that controls this. I'm very quickly going to, I'm actually not going to go there. I'm going to go to my profile tool. I'm going to go to the path profile settings. I'm sorry for that. And the way that we now can render a point in the profile view is to establish a swath. Now that swath will extend the line to be a polygon within which you can look at the maximum, minimum, or average elevation along that perpendicular path. Now I'm going to do it based on an average, and the distance from the path I'll draw will be 1 meter. So in other words, I'm creating a 1 meter wide swath. My points will be rendered within that extent. The setting that specifically controls the display of 3D points is right here. Draw 3D point features. It's not enabled by default. It is something you can enable within the settings. I'm also, while I'm here, going to remove the display of vertices, because this will actually display a vertex for the line that I'm going to be using for this process. So with those settings established, I'm going to click OK. Now, how do I draw my profile that will encompass these points representing my images? Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I'm going to use my digitizer. I'm going to select all the points. They're all now highlighted, as you can see, and very quickly I'm going to transform those points into a line. Create new line feature from selected points. I'm not going to dwell on the settings or what we're doing here. We'll simply click OK. Oops, it'll give me an option to define a layer. I'm just going to call it flight for now. That works for me, and click OK. Now, as a result of that process, we generate a line. You'll see that line now highlighted. I'll highlight it again here, that red dashed line, because for this profile, I'm going to use an existing line. Unlike the normal use of the profile tool where we draw it dynamically, this time the profile is going to be rendered based on an existing line. So with that line selected, again, not dwelling on the specifics here, I'm just going to go to my analysis measurement and path profile tool, and I'll just drag this down below my screen and dock it. Now, the end result of this process is I have a cross-sectional view that's actually dashed because we're actually looking at the average here, not the path itself, but the average across our 1 meter swath. And if I zoom in a little closer here, you'll start to see the individual icons representing where my photographs were taken. And you'll see maybe a little bit of offset as the drone was moving along. This gives us a representation of the photo location. As I move my cursor to each individual image, you'll see that represented in the 2D map. So this is one example of where you can use this idea of rendering a point within the profile view as a way to do some initial QA, perhaps, about your drones. You're looking at the drones from top down, you maybe are not getting that information. So that is just example number one of this tool. I'm going to switch to another workspace here that I've actually got running in the background and look at a second example of this. And I think this may be a more useful one. Here we have a point cloud. The point cloud is colorized by RGB, so we're actually seeing it almost like a photograph. Sitting on top of that point cloud are ground control points. Now, again, this is a workflow that you may have seen before, and those of you who have been through training will definitely have seen this one, because we use this to illustrate a process of vertical rectification, adjustment of a point cloud to reflect surveyed control points that were maybe captured after the point cloud was created. Now, I happen to know that these ground control points are offset from the local ground, and that is the basis of the process. The tool, if we actually used it, is called LiDAR QC. We're not going to do that today, but this will allow me to adjust my point cloud to reflect the elevations that were captured in my control points. That aside, what we want to do today is quite simple. We want to view these points in relation to the underlying point cloud to see how much offset there is before we initiate the process. Is it worthwhile for us doing this? We can see that visually now by rendering not only the LiDAR data, but also the ground control points in our profile view. For this, once again, my first visit here is to the settings. Because one of the settings that we need to address, because we're dealing with LiDAR now, is the option to display LiDAR along the path, which is what we want to do. And we can also specify the swath distance. When profiling LiDAR, you have to establish a swath. It will not create a cutaway with LiDAR. You need to establish essentially a buffer, and that's what we'll do here. That's set to 75 meters in my case. I'll leave that as is. And again, making sure that the box is checked. It looks like I've got another instance of Global Mapper, so that wasn't checked in this instance. It will be retained once I check it once. So that's been applied here. I'm gonna click OK. And when I draw my path, as you will see, I'm just going to draw it along the length of this corridor. These are power lines, by the way. I didn't introduce the data itself, but you'll see that in a second. But once I draw this path, you'll see that the swath encompasses not only the point cloud, but also the ground control points. You can see those now rendered on my profile view, this being my power lines, and you can see where those control points are in three-dimensional space here. We know there's a significant offset when the data was collected, when the point cloud was processed, there was an error, and we can see that visually. We know now we can embark on this LiDAR QC process and correct that, move your LiDAR data to match the control points that were collected. So I use those two examples. Obviously, these are pertinent for other workflows, but just as an illustration of the new functionality, which is this ability to render your points in the profile view. Next,
it really is, David, kind of impressive. Every time we add something to the profile tool, I think about how much the profile tool really can do for us. I mean, this is one specific example, right? But we think about, LiDAR analysis, terrain analysis, and it's just, it's funny to be such a great tool for such what sounds so simple up front.
Absolutely, and I have to say, for manual editing of LiDAR data, you have a group of points that for whatever reason are something you need. Much easier to interact with those here in the profile view. We're not obviously focusing on that today, but yeah, the profile tool really is a very, very important part of how you'll interact with any 3D data in Global Mapper. And now, as we've shown, we've added points to that, so it brings up another way of using that tool. Absolutely, Jeff, you're completely right here. Back on our to-do list again, the next bullet on the list here is combining single band images. Jeff, I'm going to hand over to you to guide us through this one. Maybe you can start by introducing the data.
Yeah, sure. So this, what we're looking at here is data from Landsat 8. So those of you who are familiar with working with satellite data, Landsat is one of the US satellite constellations, but Europe has similar ones, and there's similar ones from other countries around the globe. It's very common when we're working with the raw data from a satellite, and we see it sometimes with aerial multiband imagery as well, to have each color band or spectral band to be its own individual file. So what we have displayed here right now is just 3 specific color bands from the point cloud, or excuse me, from the satellite image of this date. And so what we'll see, what I happen to have checked is bands 2, 3, and 4. For Landsat 8, those happen to be our RGB bands. And normally we use RGB, and we will today to build a true color, sometimes called true color composite image that we'll see. But each of these, files or layers here only has one individual band of data. It displays as grayscale. I mean, you can always, use feature info or the layers metadata to dig into information about that given image. You know, for instance, here we'll see, you know, just one band. What our goal is going to be is to take all three of those individual layers and merge them into one multi-band image so that we can view it in true color and have it contained in one file. This, you know, used to be possible in Global Mapper before the introduction of this tool, but it took, you know, a few extra steps. It was a little bit of a longer, less intuitive process. And, you know, given the prevalence, you know, these days for satellite data and single band imagery, we wanted to stream that a little bit. And so this is a layer function, and I can get to it from the layer menu. And about the, looks like fourth option down here, it's called create multi-band layer from single band layers. And when I go ahead and open this tool, it by default is going to have, should have the layers checked that I was previously looking at in the control center. So you could choose a different subset of bands here. You know, each of these bands will represent a different spectral range or color range. I think with Landsat 8, band 1 might be near infrared. They changed it up, you know, from Landsat 7 to Landsat 8, so I never quite remember all the other designations, but all publicly available information you can find on the NOAA and USGS website. Anyway, when I have my 3 color bands selected, I'm going to go ahead and just hit OK. And now I'm going to be asked if I need to you know, reorder the layers at all. I'm going to skip that here just so we can look at another handy little setting coming up. But you can always reorganize how the layers are structured in the image itself, and we'll talk about why that's important. I'm going to give this a new name. I'm just going to call it, we'll call it True Color. And we'll see that should generate fairly quickly. It will be now the default layer that is displayed, and the other layers are shut off. We'll see it's just a single layer now. And if I look at the layer's metadata, we'll see that it is a 3-band image. So that process is very quick and very easy. The reason I didn't initially reorder my bands is because I want to point out something that has existed for Global Mapper in a while, and now can be really handy. This probably looks a little off to us in terms of color, right? The world probably isn't always this shade of blue, and things just look a little funny. The reason being is that by default, we generally think of the 3 color bands, red, green, and blue, in that order: band 1, band 2, and band 3. That was for the longest time traditionally how Landsat and many systems did it, and that's how you know, Global Mapper came to have its defaults. With the change to Landsat 8 in particular, that now happens to be inversed. So what I'm going to do is use the quick little built-in option to switch this such that we are going band 3, 2, 1 rather than band 1, 2, 3. I could, of course, do that manually if it wasn't one of the built-in options, so I could manually say each color channel is which band, but in this case, we have a built-in shortcut for that since it's so common. When you apply that, what we'll see now is a much more realistic and what we would expect in terms of our true color imagery to look like. So at this point, again, this data exists within Global Mapper. And, you know, of course, if we want to make something like this permanent, we could export this file out to any format which would support it, which in Global Mapper is a large list. David, are you still there with us?
I'm sorry, I was muted.
I thought you
A
might
little
be.
flashing light on my mic tells me I'm muted. I didn't pay attention. I was just saying that there was a question came in about exporting. It looks like you answered that already. Maybe a follow-up: if you're exporting this as a multi-band, maybe a multi-band GeoTIFF, it will also respect those bands, those assigned bands as well in that single file that you export.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Keep those questions coming in, folks. We've got a few that have drifted, and we've been kind of answering those offline a little bit. But is there any way, this is a question that just arrived when I asked, and I mentioned, any way to get Landsat data directly into Global Mapper? I don't know, Jeff, if you want to maybe address that one.
So what you can do is use the online data tool, and that will link you to USGS Earth Explorer, where the data can be accessed from.
Maybe you could grab that, show that dialog box very quickly here. I know most folks will probably be familiar with that already, but
so
yeah.
Online data tool. Oh, you're testing me off the top of my head where that this, let's see, should be under imagery and
there we go, right in the middle.
Landsat downloader. Yeah.
So this is a redirect to a website, and you can then explore what data that you need within your area. So not directly linkable as a stream service, but certainly something
I'm not certain if it exists as a live stream. I don't think it's provided that way from USGS, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, but the question was, can you access it from within Global Mapper? And I guess the short answer is yes, you can. There's a way to do that. Okay, we're going to continue on the theme of working with raster data. I'm just trying to, Jeff, I'm going to grab the screen back again. Give me a second. And let's take a look at our agenda here. Making sure that I'm choosing the right window. There we go.
Yep.
There's a little bit of lag in our screen share, so I have to make sure that we're waiting for the screen to refresh. So yeah, Jeff, you and I need to maybe pay attention to that. No, okay, looks like we're good. So fourth bullet here, a couple of new raster contrast options. This, again, I mentioned at the start, there's been a number of enhancements to working with raster data. We typically find a lot of our work is focused on vector and deep point cloud data, but we've spent a little bit of time over the last year, or last release cycle, I should say, looking at improving the raster processing. I'm going to show you very quickly a couple of additional examples of this process. By the way, I'm going to unload the work that Jeff had done. It's going to ask me to save, and in the real world, those of you who are kind of new to Global Mapper, you'll likely want to do this, because if you don't, anything you've done, any process you go through will be gone. Needless to say, exporting before you remove the data would be a wise move. We're not going to do that today. And I'm going to load up another workspace here that is going to allow us to take a look at a couple of examples of raster processing. Now, the first of these should be fairly evident when we finish it. This is just some low resolution imagery. I've used this quite a lot, this particular area quite a lot in some of my training classes, and I've always kind of had this feeling that was a little too green, a little too green for maybe this is the real world. I don't know. I haven't been to this area, but that's just my superficial impression. But it also gives me an opportunity to show how we can adjust that. One of the new adjustment options we have to apply what's called a linear stretch, a custom linear stretch when applying contrast adjustments. So for this, you'll see I, by the way, have two layers in my control center. Split screen here, before and after. I will change the after layer. The after is the one over there on the right side. I'll turn it off, turn it on so you can see. And I want to adjust the options specifically for that one so that we can see the results by comparing it to what came before. This new tool, and the couple of tools I'm going to show you here, are under the color contrast adjustment section. And again, this component will only be visible if you access this dialog box from a raster layer. Obviously, this doesn't pertain to working with your vectors, your shapefiles, etc. Color contrast adjustment is specifically targeted to those the situations where you have raster data. And you'll see some of the options we have in here. Many of these we've had before. Obviously, we're not applying adjustment by default, but we can, as you see, apply your contrast adjustment in a number of different ways. What I'm going to do specifically in this one is our linear stretch, but I'm going to customize it. That is the new option here. When you check that option, I'm going to go to the setup. Now, you'll see it's going to try to derive some information about my imagery before I initiate this process. Hopefully it will not take too long to populate. Oh, disappeared into the background here. I'll come back again in just a second. There we go. And you'll see we get a histogram, a graphic representation of the individual bands. And you'll see that represented down below. And you'll see the distribution of the color across that range. Now, immediately I can see a bias here towards the lower end for my blues and for my greens. And this is, again, for my blues and my reds, I'm sorry. And this is what I would have anticipated in this. This is why I need to correct this. Now, without going into the details, I'm going to enter a couple of modified values here, the stretch range. I'm going to make this a little more condensed. Rather than being the default, which is 0 to 255, I'm going to make that 220. that being my red. That will increase the intensity of the red, and you'll see that in just a second as we go through this process. We'll do the same. I'll go back to the other settings as well. Let's go to the green one. Green one will retain that as is. The green distribution looks fine. The blue, I will also make a slight modification. Now you'll notice the stretch range that's detected in the image is condensed anyway. I want to do that a little more here. Let's go ahead and bring that also down to 220. Now with those settings applied, we'll click OK. Now if we need to do a little QA, we can click apply and maybe change some of those. But by clicking apply or OK, it will adjust the image contrast. And again, I think I'm happy with the results. I'll click OK to close that. You'll see left side, right side. I don't know what quality your monitor is, but in my monitor, I can see a distinct enhancement of those earth tone colors over on the right side that are certainly not present on the original. And that makes the image a little more usable. It allows me to identify certain features that have that color range. So a little bit of a kind of update in terms of the ability to define more specifically or customize that contrast or the linear stretch contrast adjustment. Okay, we just had a note come in from one of our product managers internally that some of those bugs that we're seeing will get fixed. That idea of the colors, the actual graphic representation of the histogram will be colorized. There is a hot fix coming out for Global Mapper that will update some of those kind of minor issues that we encountered with the initial release, that being one of those. Okay.
Also worth noting, David, I had forgot that there is a direct download for Landsat from Amazon S3, but that is not something that is free. I believe it requires the user to have an S3 account.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep this instance open. I'm going to remove my data. Again, this is another situation. If I do not retain or do not save what I've done, any changes I made are gone. Obviously, with the changes we made were made internally. The effects of any edits you make internally within Global Mapper have no effect on the original file. So the image file that I would have loaded originally is still in its original form, would require me to export that to apply that to the original file. Okay, another example of image processing. This time we're going to shift our focus here and go to a different part of the world. I think this one, I was hoping on my recent files list, I'll just open it manually. This is going to bring up an example of a workspace where we actually have two overlapping images. Now, Jeff and I were discussing this before the class. What's the best way to visualize difference? That's a good component of any analysis process, is to actually look at the data first before you run any process. We could do that by side-by-side views. That's what I did in the last procedure. Those two windows had different data sets that can be set up using our add 2D map views function. This is another example of how we can compare two different data sets, in this case obviously covering the same area. I'm going to use my image swipe tool. Image swipe is a tool that allows you to pull back a raster layer to see what's underneath, and you can choose which to pull back. Just to give you a little perspective here, hopefully you can see in the layer names, we have some imagery from 2005 and also imagery from 2018. The 2018 imagery is below, and if I pull back the 2005 using image swipe, hopefully you're seeing this in the screen version, a little bit of time lag here, but hopefully you're seeing, obviously the 2018 image quality is much higher than what we saw produced in 2005. Now, for this to address this, I'm going to apply a histogram match. I'm going to take one image and adjust it so the histogram or color distribution matches another selected layer. And obviously in this case, I'm going to adjust my 2005 layer so that the colors represented match those that were present, that were assigned in 2018. So let's double click on the 2005 layer to begin this process. This is my, again, raster options. We're back where we were a few minutes ago. This time I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. And this is the new function, histogram matching. Match your histogram to another layer. You choose that option and you choose the layer. And obviously I've only got one other layer present here. So quite simple, we'll click that layer and we'll click apply. Again, apply allows you to retain the display of the dialog box. If you maybe need to make additional adjustments, clicking OK does the same thing and obviously closes the dialog box as well. Now immediately you can see the image from 2005 looks different. It looks better, I guess, if you want to give it a value judgment here. Again, using my image swipe tool, you can see the colors match pretty well here. The histogram match has assigned colors in the older imagery that match those in the newer imagery. Okay.
We had at least one person who was very excited to see see that added to the application. A couple questions came in while David was talking about demoing the application. So you can always go head to our website in the downloads page and request a free trial of the application. Or at the end of the webinar today, I think we'll have our sales team's email address up. Feel free to shoot them an email and they can help you get set up with a demo as well if you want to look at some of this functionality or any other functionality in the app if you don't have it.
Absolutely. And we can do a one-on-one demonstration for you and your company and your colleagues if that's necessary. Obviously, what we show is a very kind of generic approach to software capability, but if you want to see it in the context of what you anticipate using it for, then by all means, we can set up a one-on-one meeting to go over those more specific functions. So, okay, again, unloading my data. Let's see where we are here. We're making progress through this list. Next item up. Okay, a couple of raster options. Layout editor improvements. Jeff, I don't know if you want to guide us through what we've done with the layout editor.
Sure, yeah, let's go ahead and take a look.
Let me get this all ready for you. I'm going to load up a workspace. And once again, I'll hand over to you so you can take it from there.
Thank you. So the map layout editor is the dedicated tool in Global Mapper that allows us to prepare data for more of a final cartographic map, whether that's printed, digitally saved to a PDF, etc. And we're constantly getting feedback from users on ways that they would like to see things added to it and ways to make it better. And so there's a variety of new little tools in here. And I'm actually just looking at my notes, realizing there's something else that I want to talk about as well in here. But let's go ahead and take a look at the map layout editor. Now, when you first create a map layout as part of a workspace, it will get saved. So right now, when I open this, I believe we have one saved here. And so it will pop open as to where I had left it with my previous work. I could always start a new one if I needed to. In this case, I don't need to do that. And so what I'm going to do here is work on aligning some of my text objects a little better so that they snap together and align a little bit more cleanly. The first thing I'm going to do, I think, is not new, but I'm going to align my text box here to the bottom and over to the left. So it's now snapped to the bottom left of my layout. To get my little info box here to match, what I'm going to do first is snap it down. And I'm going to snap it to the nearest object, in this case on its left.
Jeff, I think you might want to make them the same size first so you can select them both.
Oh, yes, you are correct. Let's bring that back on screen. Thank you. We also have the option here.
I think if you hold Control button down to select them both, there you go.
I was dealing with the mouse lag. Okay, there we go. I now have the option to make them the same size. And the way I want to do that in this case is with the height. So they all fit along my bottom border here. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and snap to the nearest. Let's see, I think we can do this on the right. Is that correct? There we go. And so what that does is it snaps the existing feature to its next closest on the right side. Everything lines up well here. I had at one point inserted an image as well. That image file is missing and probably needs to be realigned a little. So the first thing I can do with an image file that may have moved is go into its properties and take a look where that file path may be. This looks like it's on David's computer. David, is that file still there, you think? Or should I attempt?
There it is right there where you are. The logo is the file.
Thank you. There we go. So now that should fix that file path. And maybe my image is a little big. And so maybe, I could have dynamically done that, but maybe what I'll do here again is match the height. Oops, click those the wrong way. Little Control Z is.
I knew you wanted an opportunity to.
I was not intentional, but yes, it worked out well. Oh, I keep clicking them backwards. There we go. And this isn't going to work either, is it? Because now I'm going the wrong way. Okay. Since I'm just going in circles here, we're going to drag that back. And that match our height. Now, since it's a square, it's going to look a little funky, and I might shrink it down manually because we have a little bit of a funny shape here. If I had done the logo first, as I'm sure David will tell me, it would have snapped in much better. We'll drag that down in here. I will align it to the bottom right and stretch it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And there we go.
So I should have had that workspace prepared a little better for you, Jeff. But
That's
we've already had a couple of
problem.
comments, and I should say there's been a few people have given this the thumbs up already. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a contrived workflow, but the idea of now being able to manually manipulate these on-screen elements. Obviously, folks are using the layout editor. We're getting those comments coming in. This idea of snapping has been something that has been talked about, has been requested. Yeah.
And then in addition to that, I think previously released was the ability to save groups, and the idea here is that I could build the title block from this. So I could group these and save them, and then anytime I need to come back in, make a new map, I just import this shape. So I've built it once and it's ready to go as I need it to.
Yeah, and your logo will likely have been there originally, so you wouldn't have to do the manual manipulation. That being, I didn't know we were in the construction business there, Jeff. That's a Blue Marble logo there. I didn't know that was a sideline that we've gotten into here. But yeah, so
one last thing I do want to mention here that is new for 24, am I? Yes, is the ability to insert arrow elements. So that can be an arrow with a design heading, or maybe just a fixed line. Perhaps I put a label on the map and I want to connect it with a line to my feature on the map. I can insert those features as well.
Yeah, or even an image. You maybe you have a photograph or an image. That photograph is not just floating. You can actually assign that to a location. So yeah, that's again another example of a function that was requested, and we've added in there. This is a work in progress. Obviously, this is going to continue to develop and to evolve, and obviously printing maps is still important for a lot of people, and so we're putting the work into making sure that this is doing what it should do. And please stay in touch with us if there's issues or concerns that you have with these tools, or maybe enhancements that you would like to see. Yeah, Jeff has already indicated to one question come in about more dynamic snapping. That is a project that's being worked on right now as well. So look out for future releases to get an enhanced version of this.
And I will mention before I let you steal the screen back, David, somebody asked about changing how the scale bar looks. You can go into any element and into the properties, adjust styling, fonts, background fill. All of that can be adjusted there as well.
Yeah, and as Jeff demonstrated at the start, any work that you do within the layout editor is saved initially in the workspace itself. Jeff didn't have to recreate this. It was saved last time we set this up, but also we can save a template so that if this design that he spent so much time working on is something he wants to apply for his next building project, everything is going to be in place for him. He doesn't have to do this manual manipulation. So saving a template is a very powerful tool, and you can share templates as well. That template is literally a file that you save, and then you can load that file in to your local instance or share that with another user. So we're going off on a little bit of a tangent here. These are not new tools, but the snapping is tool, the arrow tool is a new one as well. So enhancements to our layout editor. Okay, let's see where we are in our list here. Once again, I'm going to grab the screen back from Jeff. Hopefully this is going to work this time. It looks like it has. Okay, on our list here, you'll see a couple of additional bullets. These are going to be short. I'm going to do a quick overview of some 3D vector rendering improvements. You're already seeing the results of that over on the right side anyway. Jeff is going to quickly look at a new online data option that's available. We kind of visited the online data as we introduced the access to Landsat. We're going to go back there just to look at an online data service, and hopefully wrapping up by the top of the hour. I'll take a quick look at an option to provide a link to a feature on the map, and specifically to a page within that within a PDF. So let's take a look at the vector tools here, Jeff. I'm going to stick with your workspace here, and I'm going to close your layout editor. By the way, any modification you made will again be retained dynamically. I didn't have to save anything there. If I open up the layout editor again, it will have retained all the edits that Jeff had made. Now, this is an easy one to demonstrate very quickly here. I'm going to pop this up as a 3D view. What you're looking at here is actually a series of 3D vector features. You see it's kind of an urban environment here, just 3D extruded buildings. A couple of new things I want to show here. One related to the visualization and one related to kind of doing a little vector editing. First one is very easy. I'm going to double click on the buildings layer and I'm going to apply a specific visualization for that layer. I can do that under area styles, and I'm going to override the defaults here. Right now it's a solid fill, or sorry, no fill, but I'm going to make it a solid fill. This is kind of starting with the base level here. I'm going to make this maybe a gray color will work. I'll just retain the color as it is right now. The important thing here, the new visualization option is right at the bottom. This is always available for anything, or has always been available for any polygon in the top-down or 2D view. Now it applies in the 3D view as well. A couple other options we could, and one of the things I do like to do occasionally is even remove the border, so that the outline of the buildings is no longer going to be visible. Again, you'll see the kind of the hard borders, hard edges of my building. By making those null, it will create essentially ghost buildings in this case. So again, we'll click cancel. Oh, shoot, I didn't mean to do that. Click the wrong button here. Sorry for repeating what I just did. I guess this is a good way to remember it. If you do it twice, you'll do it properly. Again, we'll make it gray, and again, null, and we're almost there with apologies. We'll make that semi-transparent, about 50% transparency. This time, click the OK button. And there we can see. Over there on the right side, you can see my buildings in a different form. Sometimes useful to see what's behind a building, or maybe looking at imagery underneath the buildings, as you can see. So being able to represent those as a semi-transparent. Now my transparency was 50%. You can adjust that to whatever level you want. Again, allowing you now to interact with whatever underlying data is present, but also being able to see your vector features. So that is one enhancement. The second of these, again, is very simple. This is not a new tool, but rather a new visualization option. I'm picked on a building here that's right in the middle of my screen. I'm going to move my 3D view up as well so we can see the same building here. What I'm going to do here is cut a hole in the building. Now I'm going to simulate maybe that there's a courtyard. In fact, I have a polygon that already exists. We want to cut a plaza or a courtyard. I want a kind of open area in the middle of the building. Anybody who knows this area, this is some buildings in the greater Portland area. This is not a real courtyard. I'm pretending here. But what I'm going to do, this is just a standard edit tool. I'm going to select that. That becomes a cutting tool. I'm going to use one of the tools, the options in the Global Mapper Digitizer toolbar to cut that area from another area, and I'll choose what to cut from. We'll not delete it. I'm just going to click OK. So that functionality has always been there. What is new is what we see in the 3D view now, and this is really cool. As you can see, I have this building over here on the right side of my screen in which there is now a courtyard, as you can see. So we're able to cut a hole and do a little bit more precise vector manipulation and have that reflected as we render in 3D. Transparency, as you note, and also this idea of cutting holes. So as a little kind of foray into the work with the digitizer. Needless to say, there's a lot of other digitizing tools that are available. Okay, we are almost out of time. I think we've maybe time for one more quick one, Jeff. Maybe take a quick look at land cover, and I'm going to also use the same workspace to do some page linking. So, yeah, Jeff, why don't you tell us about? And I've got this already loaded, so it should be fairly easy to demonstrate.
Okay. So, as I'm sure many of you know, when we think about land cover, often, similar vein as land use, right? Land cover is telling us the physical characteristics of the landscape. Land use is telling us kind of how people are using it. In terms of land cover, though, very often derived from satellite imagery. And so what we're looking at here is a new source from the European Space Agency. The new source on the left from 2020 compared to a older source from 2015. What we can see is that with the newer, much higher resolution data source, we can see much more detail in terms of, I think this is, representing London over in the UK. And we can see much more detail as to the land cover in the region, simply with newer, higher resolution data sets. Land cover is very popular these days if we're talking about, large scale, maybe coastal or wetland changes. If we're thinking about, in the US, impacts of the recent large storms we've had, many of us are dealing, we see landscape change due to fire and things like that. This is where those land cover maps come into play, and now just a really great way to have a new free public source at a much higher resolution available to us. And even if, I like to use, David showed us the swipe tool earlier, but I think if we have both of these set properly, just an amazing comparison with how much more detail we have from a new source like this.
Yeah, and a very appropriate, maybe with this specific geographic area, green space monitoring as well. Yeah. You can see very clearly on the left side.
Absolutely.
Very hard to get that same degree of depth in the original data. I should also say, by the way, and this is a streamable server, so we're not going to open the dialog box again, but you can access this within the land cover section on the online data. This is not just, although it's administered by the European Space Agency, it is a worldwide data set. Those of you maybe in North America and the United States can also access this data. And you can use a lot of Global Mapper's raster processing tools, including raster classification, to extract data from this for, again, green space monitoring might be a good example. So, yeah. Hey, great question that just came in.
Just gonna say that.
Legend. Occasionally, when you stream data from an online source, raster data, there will be a legend. Obviously, we've got colors. Colors represent something. I determined that the green is green space. I would assume that is the case. Blue looks like water as well. Red probably the built environment. But in this case, with this particular feed, it does not have a legend. So we need to do a little homework, which is a perfect segue for our very final exercise here. We're going to link a document. Now, I'm not sure how this is something you'll do in the real world, but it gives me an opportunity to demonstrate this final little tool that we're going to demonstrate, which is file link. I'm going to close the second window here. I'm going to bring up just a single view of Greater London here. Oh, no, got the right one. Let me turn off the underlying data here. We can just leave the 2020 version of that land cover data. I know the legend exists. One of the things you can do, by the way, in the online data dialog is right-click on one of the services and it will take you right to the source. From that source, I was able to grab a PDF. You see where we're going with this, and I'm going to link that PDF to my map. Now, I'm going to do this just very quickly and dynamically. I'm going to create a polygon feature here, somewhere out in the Thames estuary here, and I'm going to make this a link to trigger my legend. So I'm going to assign it to a layer. We'll call it legend. Now, this obviously is just very specific. Let me try to spell that correctly, L-E-G-E-N-D. And this is not something you'll likely do in a practical context with online data, but just to illustrate this really cool new linking tool. What I'm going to do with that feature is I'm going to apply a link, add a file link. This is not new. This has been here for quite a while. You'll see the button right here in the dialog box, allows me to browse to the file. And again, I downloaded the world cover manual for this data. That will link to that PDF. What is new is the ability I have now to zoom to a particular page. Now, having previewed that, I know that my page number is page 13. So I'm going to do a pound sign. Bear with me for just 1 second here while I get my keyboard in order. There we go. Pound sign, and then page. Again, if I can't type while I'm talking here, let's page equals 13. Now, this link will go to the PDF, but then it will open up page 13. My fingers are crossed that this will actually work here. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click OK again. That polygon that exists over here is just a polygon, but it includes a link. And if I click the link, Global Mapper recognizes that, and it will give me the option to either just display the information about the polygon or to open the embedded link, either within Global Mapper, if it was an appropriate format. But in our case, we're simply going to open in Windows. And again, my fingers are crossed here that this will actually work. Haha. From off screen, we have the legend. The question came in about the legend. Yes, it does exist. Unfortunately, not embedded in the map itself, but it is available. And by providing this link, it gives me the opportunity to see that my green's tree cover, my red is built up, etc., etc., etc. So Thank you for asking the questions. It allowed me to demonstrate that. So again, not directly related to land cover, but the idea of being able to link to an external file, obviously, but also within a PDF, a specific page. Maybe a more relevant workflow might be if there's a building report and you click on the building, it will take you right to the specific page which has the pertinent information. That's what we can now do within Global Mapper. Just about made it. I think that covers the last bullet. We have much more. There is much more in terms of new functionality. I would recommend those of you who want to explore further, if you have version 24 downloaded, you can download it today if you haven't got it already. You can go to the help system and you can see a complete list of the new functionality. There are many, many pages worth of new functionality and improvements that have been made for this release. So I do encourage you to take a look at that. There may be functionality that's important to you that we did not cover in our very brief highlights session today. Quick preview, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself here. Quick preview for those of you who intend to visit us on Thursday, and I hope all of you will. Hopefully you have time, 10 o'clock Thursday morning Eastern time here. We're going to be introducing Global Mapper Pro specifically. Obviously, Global Mapper Pro includes all of what we covered today, but it's got a lot of additional functionality. Script recording, we alluded to that early in our session, where you can go through a procedure in the application, and when you finish that, save that as a script. A very, very powerful tool, been requested for many years. We now have that one available. Also the ability to capture script contents by establishing the settings in a particular dialog box, copying those settings out and being able to embed that in a script as well. We'll be taking a look at a couple of those workflows in our session on Thursday. Kriging, Jeff is going to be going through Kriging. This is arguably the most advanced tool that's ever been added to Global Mapper. You're seeing a quick illustration of that on the right side of the screen. Jeff, I don't know if you want to mention very quickly what that entails so we can whet their appetite a little bit for Thursday.
For those of you who don't know what Kriging is, we could think of it as an advanced interpolation method for creating surfaces from sample point locations. So whether we're talking point clouds, terrain, minerals and soil, we'll get into that on Thursday.
Yeah, whetted my appetite here. Okay, Global Mapper mobile package merging. This is another one that's been requested. If you have multiple folks in the field using Global Mapper mobile, now have a really powerful tool to bring in their edits and merge them together. Kind of improves that kind of field deployment workflow. LiDAR swath separation visualization, visualizing the overlap of point cloud data is another workflow that we will go through in our session on Thursday. So again, mark your calendar. In fact, if you have your phone available, oops, sorry, I went too far. Go ahead and grab your phone, take a quick snapshot here. This is a QR code. You can register for our session on Thursday using this link. I'll just keep this up for a few seconds here. So again, find your phone, go ahead and scan the QR code, and you can register right there for our session on Thursday.
While that's up, David, somebody asked about recordings. Yes, these will be recorded, posted probably within a week or two. And I think you'll even get an email as to the recording being posted.
Yeah, and we're hoping early next week actually to have both of these up. So if you can't make Thursday session, obviously you can watch the recording of that session at a later date. So hopefully you had a chance to scan the QR code. Folks, thank you very much for showing up. Thank you for using Global Mapper, for your interest in Global Mapper. We really appreciate it. The link at the bottom, Jeff alluded to this earlier. If you're not using Global Mapper, or if you have an older version and you just want to take a look at version 24, you can download a trial version of that today. Maybe follow some of the workflows that we did, or explore those tools in the context of your data. Jeff, thank you very much for lending your expertise today. Really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, I expect to see you again on Thursday.
Yes, sir. Have a good one, everybody.
Yeah, we'll see you Thursday, folks. We'll see you at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning.